A decade of silence, unanswered questions, and a hope that never truly faded. For one man, the pain of losing his best friend felt eternal. But what happened 10 years later is a testament to the power of love and loyalty. This is the story of a missing German shepherd and the incredible reaction of his owner when they were reunited. Get ready for a heartwarming journey that might just bring tears to your eyes. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. Stories like this deserve to be shared. Ethan Walker was just 28 years old when his life changed forever. He lived on a small farm in the heart of Montana, working as a mechanic and tending to the land he'd inherited from his parents. But the soul of the farm, the one who made it feel alive, was Axel, his loyal German shepherd. Axel was more than just a dog. He was Ethan's shadow, his companion in everything. Ethan had rescued Axel as a puppy from a shelter, and the bond they shared was unbreakable. They did everything together: long hikes through the open fields, hours spent repairing tractors in the barn, or simply lying under the stars in the quiet of the countryside. Axel was smart, protective, and seemed to understand Ethan in a way no one else could. But one summer afternoon, everything changed. Ethan and Axel had gone down to the river that ran through the property, a place they visited almost daily. Axel loved chasing sticks that Ethan threw into the water, barking excitedly as he splashed through the shallow edges. The routine was so familiar that Ethan didn't think twice when he let Axel run ahead. That was the last time he saw him. Ethan called and called, his voice echoing across the fields, but Axel never came back. He searched for hours, then days, combing the woods, checking neighboring farms, and even posting flyers in town. He visited every shelter within a 100-mile radius, hoping for any sign of his beloved dog. But there was nothing. No tracks, no sightings, no clues. It was as if Axel had vanished into thin air. Ethan was devastated. The farm, once filled with the sound of Axel's playful barks and the patter of his paws, now felt unbearably quiet. The ache of his absence lingered in every corner of the house, in every walk Ethan took alone. For years, he kept Axel's favorite blanket and collar, unable to let go of the hope that someday, somehow, Axel would come home. But as the years passed, that hope began to fade. Friends told Ethan to move on, to get another dog, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. Axel wasn't just a dog, he was family, and no one could take his place. By the time Ethan turned 38, Axel had been gone for 10 years. The once young man had become quieter, more reserved, his life marked by the loss of his best friend. Though he had learned to live with the void Axel left behind, a part of him always wondered, what if? What if Axel was still out there somewhere? What if he needed him? On a crisp autumn morning, as Ethan sipped his coffee on the porch, something caught his eye at the edge of the field. A figure, small, distant, was moving slowly along the tree line. Ethan squinted, his heart quickening. It was a dog, but it couldn't be Axel. It had been too long. Still, something inside him stirred. He set his mug down, grabbed his coat, and began walking toward the figure, his boots crunching against the frosty ground. As he got closer, the dog stopped and looked up. Ethan's breath caught in his chest. The dog was thin, its fur matted and graying, but those eyes, those unmistakable amber eyes, were staring right at him. Ethan's voice broke as he whispered, "Axel?" The dog froze, his tail wagging hesitantly. Then, as if recognizing the man standing before him, he broke into a limping run, barking hoarsely. Ethan dropped to his knees, tears streaming down his face as Axel threw himself into his arms. 10 years had passed, but in that moment, it felt like no time at all. Ethan held him tightly, his voice shaking. "You're home, buddy. You're home." Ethan held Axel in his arms, his tears soaking into the dog's matted fur. It was as if the world around them had stopped, and all that existed was this moment, this reunion that Ethan had prayed for but never thought possible. Axel whimpered softly, nuzzling against Ethan's chest as though to say, "I missed you too." Ethan pulled back slightly to look at him, his hands trembling as they ran over Axel's thin frame. The once strong and vibrant dog he remembered was now frail, with ribs that jutted out and patches of fur missing. His face was grayer, his eyes clouded with age, but they still held the same familiar spark. "What happened to you, boy?" Ethan whispered, his voice cracking. "Where have you been?" Axel wagged his tail weakly, as if trying to answer. Ethan wiped his face, stood up, and scooped Axel into his arms. "Come on, let's get you inside," he said gently. "We've got a lot of catching up to do." The walk back to the farmhouse felt surreal. Ethan couldn't stop glancing down at Axel, half afraid he might disappear again. As they crossed the threshold into the warm kitchen, Axel let out a soft sigh, his body relaxing for the first time. Ethan placed him on a thick blanket near the fireplace and quickly got to work. He filled a bowl with fresh water and rummaged through the fridge for anything Axel could eat. A few minutes later, he set down a plate of shredded chicken and rice. Axel sniffed the food hesitantly before beginning to eat, his movements slow but deliberate. Ethan watched with a mix of relief and sorrow. "You're so thin," he murmured. "We're gonna fix that, buddy. I promise." As Axel ate, Ethan pulled a small wooden box from the top of a cupboard. Inside were all the things he had kept over the years. Axel's old collar, a few photos of them together, and the blanket Axel had slept on as a puppy. Ethan spread the blanket beside the fire and placed the collar next to Axel. "I never gave up on you," he said softly. "Not really." Axel looked up at him, his amber eyes shining in the firelight. For a moment, it felt like the past 10 years had melted away. Ethan reached out and gently stroked his head. "You're a fighter, you know that?" That evening, Ethan called the local veterinarian, Dr. Caroline Brooks, who had known Axel back when he was just a pup. "Caroline, you're not going to believe this," Ethan said, his voice trembling with emotion. "Axel's back." There was a long pause on the other end. "Axel? As in, your Axel?" "Ethan, that's impossible. It's been 10 years. Ethan interrupted. "I know, but it's him, Caroline. He just showed up today. He's not in great shape, but it's him." Dr. Brooks exhaled sharply. "Bring him in first thing tomorrow. I'll clear my schedule." "Thank you," Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper. After hanging up, Ethan returned to the living room. Axel was curled up on the blanket, his head resting on his paws. He looked so peaceful that Ethan hesitated to disturb him, but there was something he couldn't wait to do. He grabbed his phone and snapped a photo of Axel lying by the fire. With trembling hands, he opened a social media app and posted the picture with a simple caption. "After 10 years, Axel is home." The reaction was immediate. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers began flooding the post with comments and messages. Some expressed disbelief, others shared tears of joy. One comment stood out. "I remember hearing about Axel when he first went missing. This is a miracle." Ethan read each comment, his heart swelling with gratitude. Axel wasn't just his dog. He was a part of the community's memory, a symbol of hope that had persisted through the years. As the fire crackled softly in the background, Ethan glanced at Axel and smiled. "Looks like everyone's happy you're back, buddy." Axel thumped his tail against the blanket in response, a faint but unmistakable sign of contentment. Ethan sat down beside him, resting a hand on his back. "I don't know where you've been or how you found your way home, but I'm never letting you go again." The night passed quietly, with Axel sleeping soundly for the first time in what felt like forever. Ethan stayed close, dozing off on the couch with one hand resting on Axel's side, as if afraid to lose him again. The next morning, Ethan woke to the soft sound of Axel shifting on his blanket. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting a warm glow across the room. For a moment, Ethan thought it had all been a dream. But when he looked down, there was Axel, curled up near the fireplace, his breathing soft and steady. "Morning, buddy," Ethan said, kneeling beside him. Axel lifted his head slowly, his tail wagging faintly. Ethan ran his hand gently along Axel's back, feeling the ridges of his ribs beneath his thin coat. "We've got a big day ahead. Let's see what Dr. Brooks has to say, huh?" After giving Axel a small breakfast of scrambled eggs and rice, Ethan carefully loaded him into his old pickup truck. Axel settled into the passenger seat, his head resting on Ethan's lap as the truck rumbled to life. The drive to the clinic was quiet, the Montana landscape stretching out in every direction. Ethan couldn't help but glance down at Axel every few moments, still in disbelief that his best friend was back. When they arrived, Dr. Caroline Brooks was already waiting outside, her hands on her hips and her expression one of disbelief. "Ethan," she said, her voice a mix of shock and warmth. "I can't believe it. That really is Axel." Ethan climbed out of the truck, gently lifting Axel in his arms. "It's him," he said softly. "I don't know how, but he found his way home." Caroline reached out to stroke Axel's head, her eyes glistening with emotion. 10 years, and he still remembers you. That's incredible. Inside the clinic, Ethan placed Axel on the examination table. Caroline began her work, carefully inspecting him while speaking softly to keep him calm. "He's definitely been through a lot," she said, running her hands over Axel's frame. "He's underweight, dehydrated, and his joints are stiff, probably from years of wandering." She paused as she reached Axel's hind leg, where a faint scar ran along his fur. "This looks like an old injury," she said. "Probably from some kind of accident or a fight. It healed on its own, but not well." Ethan clenched his fists, guilt gnawing at him. All those years. He must have gone through so much. Caroline looked up at him, her expression kind. "He's here now, Ethan. That's what matters. And he's lucky to have you." After running a few tests, Caroline delivered the news. The good news is, he doesn't have any life-threatening conditions. His biggest challenges are malnutrition and age-related issues like arthritis. With the right care, he could have a lot of good years left. Ethan exhaled, relief washing over him. "Thank you, Caroline. I'll do whatever it takes to get him healthy again." Caroline smiled. "I'll send you home with some supplements and medication for his joints. A high-protein diet and plenty of rest should help him recover." As Ethan carried Axel back to the truck, he felt a renewed sense of determination. Axel had survived against all odds, and now it was his turn to give back. "You're gonna be just fine, buddy," he said, stroking Axel's fur. "We'll take it one day at a time." When they returned home, Ethan set about making the farmhouse as comfortable as possible for Axel. He laid out a thicker blanket near the fireplace and placed a bowl of water and food within easy reach. He even brought Axel's old collar out of storage, though it hung loosely on his neck now. Over the next few days, Ethan followed Dr. Brooks' instructions to the letter. Axel's meals were carefully prepared, his medications given on schedule, and short, gentle walks became part of their daily routine. With each passing day, Axel seemed to grow stronger. His tail wagged more often, and his eyes regained some of their youthful spark. Ethan began to notice small but heartwarming habits returning. Axel resting his head on Ethan's knee during meals, the soft thump of his tail whenever Ethan spoke, and the way he followed him from room to room, never wanting to be apart. One evening, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset, Ethan spoke softly. "You know, I never stopped looking for you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Every time I went to town, every time I saw a stray, I wondered if it was you. I don't know how you found your way back, but I'm so glad you did." Axel leaned against him, his weight a comforting presence. Ethan wrapped an arm around him, staring out at the fields that stretched toward the horizon. The silence between them was filled with unspoken understanding, a bond that had endured a decade apart. For the first time in years, Ethan felt whole again. Ethan woke early the next morning to the soft sound of Axel stirring near the fireplace. The gentle thump of his tail against the blanket brought a smile to Ethan's face. He had barely slept, his mind racing with questions. Where had Axel been for the past 10 years? How had he survived? And most importantly, what had brought him back home? Determined to find answers, Ethan made a plan. He had kept the old flyers he had posted a decade ago in a weathered box in the attic. After breakfast, he pulled them out, laying the papers on the kitchen table. They were yellowed and creased, each one bearing the same message. Missing. German Shepherd. Answers to Axel. Last seen near the Walker farm. Reward offered. Ethan stared at the photos of Axel as a young, vibrant dog, his tail wagging in the picture as if frozen in time. The difference between then and now was stark. His heart ached as he traced a finger over the image, but there was also pride in seeing how far Axel had come despite the odds. He decided to start in town, hoping that someone, anyone, might remember something from all those years ago. Axel, though still recovering, seemed eager to join him. Ethan gently lifted him into the truck, making sure he was comfortable before they headed off. The drive into town was quiet. Axel rested his head on the armrest, his eyes following the passing scenery. Ethan couldn't help but glance at him, a mixture of gratitude and determination filling his chest. "Let's see if we can figure out your story, buddy," he said softly. Ethan's first stop was the general store. It had been the hub of the community for decades, a place where everyone came to catch up on news and gossip. As he stepped inside, the bell above the door jingled, and a familiar voice called out, "Well, I'll be Ethan Walker, as I live and breathe." It was Bill Henderson, the store's longtime owner. He was a wiry man with kind eyes, always ready with a story or two. "Been a while, Ethan. What brings you in?" Ethan smiled and gestured to Axel, who stood by his side, tail wagging gently. "I was hoping you could help me with something. This is Axel." Bill's eyes widened. "Axel? The same Axel you lost all those years ago?" "The very same," Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. "He showed up on my farm a few days ago. I'm trying to figure out where he's been." Bill crouched down, reaching out a hand to Axel. "Well, I'll be darned. Look at you, old boy." Axel sniffed Bill's hand and gave it a small lick, earning a chuckle. "He's thinner, but it's definitely him." As Ethan explained the reunion, other customers began to gather around, marveling at the story. A few remembered the flyers and the months Ethan had spent searching for Axel. One older woman, Mrs. Harper, spoke up. "I remember seeing a dog like him years ago, near the old quarry on the other side of town. He was with a group of strays, but I could never get close." Ethan's brow furrowed. "The quarry? That's miles from here. How did he even get that far?" Mrs. Harper shrugged. "Dogs are survivors. Maybe he got lost and joined the pack for safety." Bill nodded thoughtfully. "Strays stick together, especially out there. That quarry's been abandoned for years. If Axel was with them, they must have looked out for each other." Ethan's heart ached at the thought of Axel struggling to survive among strangers, but it also gave him a strange sense of peace. Axel hadn't been completely alone. "Thank you," he said sincerely. "That helps fill in some of the gaps." As Ethan prepared to leave, Bill stopped him. "You know, Ethan," he said, "there was a guy who used to feed the strays out there. Name's Roy. Lives in a cabin on the outskirts of town. He might know more about Axel." Ethan's heart raced. "Where can I find him?" Bill gave him directions, and within the hour, Ethan and Axel were driving up a dirt road toward a small wooden cabin surrounded by pine trees. An old man with a weathered face and a thick beard stepped out as they approached, squinting against the sunlight. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice gruff but not unkind. "Are you Roy?" Ethan asked, stepping out of the truck. Axel followed, his tail wagging slightly. "That's me," Roy said. His eyes fell on Axel, and for a moment, his expression softened. "Well, I'll be. I haven't seen this boy in years." "You know him?" Ethan asked, his voice trembling. Roy nodded. "I do. He used to run with a pack of strays near the quarry. Smart dog. Always kept the others in line. I started feeding them when I noticed them scavenging around my property. He was the leader, no doubt about it." Ethan knelt beside Axel, stroking his fur. "How long was he out there?" "Years," Roy said. "But one day he just stopped coming around. Figured he'd moved on, or..." He trailed off, his meaning clear. Ethan swallowed hard, trying to imagine the life Axel must have lived. "He found his way back to me," he said quietly. "After all this time, he came home." Roy smiled faintly. Dogs like him. They never forget their family. Driving back from Roy's cabin, Ethan couldn't shake the weight of everything he had learned. Axel had survived against impossible odds, leading a pack of strays, finding food where he could, and somehow making it through years of uncertainty. But even with Roy's insights, questions still lingered. What had prompted Axel to leave the quarry? And how had he found his way home after so long? As the farm came into view, Axel perked up, his ears twitching. Ethan smiled, reaching over to gently pat his head. "You're incredible. You know that," he said softly. Axel let out a quiet huff, his tail wagging faintly. Back at the farmhouse, Ethan set about making Axel comfortable. He prepared a bowl of warm chicken broth and set it beside the fireplace, where Axel now seemed to spend most of his time. As Axel drank, Ethan sat beside him, the events of the day replaying in his mind. Roy said you were the leader of the pack, Ethan murmured, stroking Axel's fur. I shouldn't be surprised. You've always been a fighter. Axel looked up at him, his amber eyes shining with a mixture of exhaustion and contentment. Ethan couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. I should have found you, he said, his voice breaking. You went through so much, and I wasn't there. Axel responded the only way he knew how, by resting his head on Ethan's knee. The simple gesture brought tears to Ethan's eyes. You're home now, he whispered, and I'll make sure you never have to go through that again. The next day, Ethan shared more of Axel's story online. He posted a picture of Axel resting by the fire, his graying fur illuminated by the soft glow of the flames. The caption read, 10 years, countless miles, and so much heartache. Axel is finally home. Thank you to everyone who helped us find the missing pieces of his journey. The post quickly went viral, spreading beyond the small Montana community. Messages poured in from people who had followed Ethan's search for Axel a decade earlier, as well as from strangers who were moved by the story. Some shared their own tales of lost pets miraculously returning, while others simply expressed their joy and admiration for Axel's resilience. One message in particular stood out. It was from a woman named Sarah who worked at an animal shelter in a neighboring state. She wrote, I think I remember Axel. About 3 years ago, a German shepherd fitting his description was brought to our shelter by a good Samaritan. He was thin but strong and had a scar on his leg. We listed him for adoption, but he escaped after only a few days. I'm so glad he finally made it home. Ethan's heart raced as he read her words. He immediately replied, asking for more details. Within hours, Sarah sent photos from the shelter's archives. Ethan's breath caught in his throat as he saw a grainy image of Axel from 3 years earlier. Despite the poor quality, there was no mistaking those amber eyes. He never stopped looking for me, Ethan whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Axel, who had been dozing beside him, stirred and thumped his tail against the floor. Ethan leaned down, pressing his forehead to Axel's. You're my hero, you know that? The story of Axel's return spread far and wide, touching the hearts of people around the world. News outlets picked it up, dubbing Axel the miracle dog. Donations poured in from strangers who wanted to support Axel's care, and Ethan made sure every cent went toward giving Axel the best life possible. But for Ethan, the true gift wasn't the attention or the money. It was the time he still had with Axel. He cherished every moment, from their quiet evenings by the fire to their slow walks through the fields. Axel's steps were slower now, and his graying muzzle showed the passage of time, but his spirit remained unbroken. One evening, Ethan received a package in the mail. Inside was a framed photo of Axel, taken during one of their walks, along with a handwritten note. Your story reminds us all of the power of love and loyalty. Thank you for sharing it with the world. Ethan placed the photo on the mantel, right beside Axel's old collar. He looked down at Axel, who was stretched out on the blanket, his tail wagging softly in his sleep. You've always been a star, buddy, he said with a smile. Now the whole world knows it. Spring arrived in Montana with a gentle warmth that breathed new life into the farm. The once frozen fields began to sprout wildflowers, and the soft hum of insects filled the air. For Ethan, the season felt like a reflection of his own journey, one of renewal and gratitude. Axel, though older and slower, seemed to thrive in the peace of their days together. Every morning, Ethan would take Axel for a slow walk around the property. They followed familiar paths, the same ones they had explored a decade earlier. Axel's steps were careful but purposeful, his nose sniffing the air as though rediscovering the sense of home. Ethan stayed close, his hand occasionally brushing against Axel's back, a silent reassurance that they were together. One day, while resting under a large oak tree at the edge of the property, Ethan found himself speaking aloud, his words carried on the breeze. You know, Axel, he began, his voice soft, I spent so many years wondering where you were. I used to imagine all sorts of things, some good, some bad, but I never stopped believing you'd find your way back. Axel, lying beside him, tilted his head as if listening. His amber eyes met Ethan's, and for a moment, it felt as though Axel understood every word. Ethan smiled, reaching over to scratch behind Axel's ears. "You're a fighter, buddy. You always have been." That afternoon, Ethan received an unexpected knock at the door. Standing on the porch was Roy, the man who had cared for Axel and the strays near the quarry. He held a small, weathered notebook in his hand. "Thought you might want this," he said, offering it to Ethan. "It's a record I kept of the dogs I fed. Axel's in there." Ethan accepted the notebook with a sense of reverence. As he flipped through the pages, he found entries detailing Axel's time with the pack, what Roy called the Alpha. Notes about his strength, his protective nature, and his ability to find food for the others filled the pages. Ethan's heart swelled with pride and sorrow as he read. "He kept them alive, you know," Roy said, his voice steady. "Even when he could have left, he stayed and took care of them. That dog's got more loyalty in him than most people I've met." Ethan glanced down at Axel, who was dozing peacefully on his blanket by the fire. "He's always been like that," Ethan said. "Even as a pup, he put others first." Roy stayed for coffee, sharing stories of Axel's time with the pack. Ethan listened intently, piecing together the years he had missed. By the time Roy left, Ethan felt a deeper understanding of Axel's journey and a greater appreciation for the dog who had fought so hard to come home. As the weeks turned into months, Ethan and Axel fell into a routine that was both familiar and new. Each day was a gift, filled with small but meaningful moments. Axel napping in the sun, the sound of his tail thumping against the floor, the warmth of his head resting on Ethan's knee. Ethan often found himself reflecting on the lessons Axel had taught him. "You've shown me what it means to never give up," he said one evening as they sat by the fire. "No matter how far you go or how hard it gets, love will always bring you home." Axel let out a soft sigh, his body relaxing against Ethan's leg. The bond between them was unspoken, but unbreakable, a testament to the power of loyalty and the resilience of the heart. One summer evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan sat with Axel on the porch, watching the sky turn shades of orange and purple. The air was warm, and the world seemed to hold its breath in quiet reverence. Axel rested his head on Ethan's lap, his eyes half closed. "You've done more than I ever could have asked, buddy," Ethan whispered. "You've shown me the best parts of life." As the stars began to dot the sky, Ethan felt a deep sense of peace. Axel had come home against all odds, and in doing so, he had reminded Ethan of what truly mattered: love, loyalty, and the enduring power of hope. Though time would eventually take its course, Ethan knew one thing for certain. The bond he shared with Axel was timeless, a love that would stay with him forever. One summer evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan sat with Axel on the porch, watching the sky turn shades of orange and purple. The air was warm, and the world seemed to hold its breath in quiet reverence. Axel rested his head on Ethan's lap, his eyes half closed. "You've done more than I ever could have asked, buddy," Ethan whispered. "You've shown me the best parts of life." As the stars began to dot the sky, Ethan felt a deep sense of peace. Axel had come home against all odds, and in doing so, he had reminded Ethan of what truly mattered: love, loyalty, and the enduring power of hope. Though time would eventually take its course, Ethan knew one thing for certain: the bond he shared with Axel was timeless, a love that would stay with him forever. If this story touched your heart, don't let it end here. Show your support by subscribing to the channel, liking this video, and sharing it with someone who loves heartwarming stories about dogs and their incredible loyalty. Axel's journey reminds us all to cherish the ones we love and to never lose hope, no matter how much time passes. Let's celebrate stories like this together, because every act of love makes the world a better place.